Paul Babb is the head of worldwide marketing for Maxon, as well as a creative artist and designer with more than 20 years' experience in 3D animation, visual effects, motion graphics, and graphic design. Hello, Paul. Welcome back.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for having me on again.
And many, many congratulations on your new title.
Thank you, sir.
Paul, on tonight's show, we're focusing on the business side of media. Most folks are working in smaller companies and don't have a lot of resources, and we're all feeling the pinch of competition. What does it take to run a successful creative business?
Well, I think that the first thing that has to come into mind is what are the goals of the creative work that you're doing. Some creatives, not all, some creatives will get lost in the woods of the creative aspects of it, what they want it to be and what they would like it to be. I know in the early days of my career, one of the first questions I would ask a client is, what do they want to see accomplished by this creative work that's going to be done? Certainly creative work, and the more creative work is engaging and eye-catching and inspiring, but I think you have to take into account what are the goals of this work that you're creating. How is the client going to see success from this creative work you're doing?
That raises, for me, one of the most intriguing questions, which is, when do we and how do we decide to stop working on a project when we've met the client's expectations or our own expectations?
I think it depends on the client and the budget. All those things have to be balanced. The clients will sometimes have unrealistic expectations. Certainly you have to temper those. You have to, educate your clients as well as be able to fulfill their expectations as best you can. When I would do that, literally my first question would be, well, what are our goals here? What do we want to accomplish? And then that would a lot of times direct the project itself and the goals of that project. And then at that point, you can start tempering. If a client says they want to take over the world, there you have to find ways to temper that. Okay, so let's talk about this particular part of the market before we start taking over the world. I think you have to find a balance of both. I think you have to find a place where the client is getting what they need, or at least satisfied that they're getting what they need, and that you're able to find some fulfillment in it. I know the creative part of me, you'll love to be able to point to something and say, I created that. And especially if it's something that catches the eye of other designers who go, that was a great idea, or that was cool, or a nice implementation. But I think sometimes that balancing that with what the client needs can be very difficult.
I want to go into that just a little bit more. You've used the word balance and used the word temper. How do we get clients to pay for the creativity they expect?
I think that has to be put down on paper and set very clear expectations. I learned that the hard way early in my career with freelance work, that people don't always want to pay what you're worth. I think you have to make it very clear what your costs are, what it costs to make revisions, the stages. Once we've reached this stage of approval, if we end up going back, that's going to incur additional cost. You just have to be completely upfront with those types of things and make it very clear so that there's there can be no gray area in quoting out a job for a client.
So it sounds like you really expect to have all this written down ahead of time, as opposed to just a verbal agreement of, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, and I learned the hard way on that. When I mention revisions, that's typically where you get killed. You start off, let's say you start off with a 3D project, and you built the models, and you haven't done any texturing or lighting, and you've done some basic animation, but you've got the guts of it there, and you want to get the client's approval at that point, and then you move forward, and they decide, I'd like to change that to a car instead of a bicycle. Well, you've gone back to the guts of the project and have to make some major changes, because frankly, clients don't understand how much work goes into these things. They don't know how complex it is. I'm going to go back to dinosaur ages. There was a time when I was building interactive CDs and DVDs for corporations as a freelancer, and they would come back to me and want to make text changes to some of the interactive presentation materials that I had developed for them. But what they didn't realize was, these were being built in Director back in the day, and once you go in and make changes, you have to recompile basically it's a small application you're recompiling, and then you had to burn those onto DVDs or CDs at the time, and then you had to test those on multiple machines. So it wasn't just going in and making a minor change to the text. It was the entire process of recompiling and burning and testing. And so I learned up front that I had to explain that and say, look, this is the process it takes to make those changes, and this is why the hours cost that much.